Today, is Shigeru Miyamoto the most misquoted game dev of all time? Shigeru Miyamoto says, quote, yes, this is Checkpoint. Welcome to Checkpoint, a show that exists, and that's enough.
Yeah, who said it had to be good?
What? Well, I mean, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, but you don't need to stress about it. The show can be absolute crap as long as we're making something, right?
Well, okay, yes, but I don't...
Great, so the pressure's off. Rebirth, the hotly anticipated second part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, is fast approaching, and that means it's time to brush up on the lore so you can understand what's happening. Not the first part of the trilogy. That's all covered by a 5-minute recap video called The Story So Far, and it's already available on YouTube. I'm talking about the real stuff, the dank stuff, the deep lore that no one remembers. Oh yeah, Advent Children. According to statements from both Tetsuya Nomura and producer Yoshinori Kitase, the remake trilogy will eventually connect to that infamous 2005 movie, the Wikipedia article for which contains a better and more honest joke than I could ever write about the film. Nomura felt that Advent Children differed from the Hollywood films, where the meaning of most scenes tends to be explained. However, with Advent Children, the staff wanted viewers to interpret the scenes individually, allowing them to come to different conclusions. That's taken from the official Advent Children prologue book, by the way, and it certainly scans from my experience watching the movie because the only lasting memory I have of it is confusion. So will Square Enix apply this frankly David Lynch-ass storytelling philosophy to the Final Fantasy Remake trilogy as a whole? I hope so, if only because it'll make my life personally so much easier.
Whoever at Valve is responsible for naming the Steam Deck's processor must think they're being very clever, because the new processor for the OLED version is called the Sephiroth processor, and has metaphorically killed the previous processor, codenamed Aerith. While this is very funny, it has somewhat backed Valve into a corner for the long-term naming conventions of Steam Deck processors. Next would logically be Cloud, or maybe Genova first, but then definitely Cloud. But where do you go from there? The first realistic possibility for someone to kill Cloud would be God Hand Mishima or Yoko Kishibojin. You know, from Ergez, that PS1 fighting game that randomly featured Final Fantasy VII characters. Except unless you want to just be circling the drain of Ergez characters for the rest of the platform's life cycle, you gotta go in a direction that allows Cloud to take the lineal title of Steam Deck processor to a deeper roster of possible murderers. And luckily, Cloud is in Smash Brothers, which... Okay, hang on, shut up. Cloud kills Sephiroth and then gets the invitation to Smash Brothers. He loses to Mii fighter Dante. Dante's been in a hajillion other games, including Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, specifically as a boss fight in the HD re-release, so Dante would then be killed by the Demi-Fiend, who, in one ending, can be considered to have been defeated by God, and gods are routinely killed by, many gaming protagonists, notably Kratos, who was in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale with Parappa the Rapper, who, at least in my experience with the PlayStation Underground demo CD, repeatedly lost his first rap battle to Chop Chop Master Onion, which is where the trail comes to an end, at which point I think Valve has to just stop making hardware.
Remember Epic's long and winding antitrust lawsuit against Apple? The courts ruled in favor of Apple back in 2021 on 9 out of 10 counts, but then both parties appealed, and it took until this April, which was another 18 months, for the whole thing to go through the appeals process, which then Apple still won. So yes, we've had first antitrust case, but what about second antitrust case? That's right, hot off of what could only be deemed a legal trouncing, Epic is back fighting Google over the same thing, which is largely, but not entirely, circumventing platform fees on in-game payments in Fortnite, which caused Google to pull it from the Play Store. And now we're here, learning all sorts of things as the court filings go public, including about something called Project Electra. According to some eagle-eyed reporting from The Verge's Sean Hollister, back in 2018, Google was seriously discussing either buying a stake in Epic itself or or partnering with Tencent to take over the company entirely in order to get Fortnite as a Play Store exclusive. Why? Well, because Google really wanted it and was willing to pay up to $2 billion for a 20% stake in the company. The deal obviously never came to fruition, which is why we're here, now watching as the court listens to these massive companies argue back and forth about sideloading and warning screens. Meanwhile, we've also discovered that Epic is paying its security expert $150,000 to testify against Google, and Google is paying theirs the relatively paltry sum of $120,000 to testify against Epic. Money that presumably all got earned by kids purchasing V-Bucks. Delightful. If you're Epic and Google.
A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. Truer words have never been spoken, and this week they were spoken by Valve head Gabe Newell, though in the more quippable, late is just for a little while, suck is forever. The original quote is actually attributed to Nintendo creative fellow Shigeru Miyamoto, who spoke it years ago in an interview, or during a press conference, or maybe at a dinner table during GDC. Actually, come to think of it, when did Miyamoto utter this industry-defining phrase? Because it is industry-defining, even if most of the industry no longer lives by it. On her blog, acriticalhit.com, Kate Williert lays out some great detective work and discovers variances of the quote have been attributed to Miyamoto, Rare, The Walls of Blizzard, GT Interactive's Jason Schreiber when talking about Unreal, not the engine, the game. But the earliest attribution that can be found is a GDC transcript from 1996 when Ellen Guan says, quote, "A game is only late until it ships, but it's bad forever." But Guan actually attributed it to her significant other, Siobhan Beeman, who worked as the project director at Origin from 1989 to 1992. Beeman confirmed that to the best of her recollection, she came up with that phrasing, but still attributed it to a general attitude in the industry. So, problem solved, correct? Except that Beeman had earlier mentioned in a 2005 retrospective of Origin that the motto was a little different. Quote, "A game's only late until it ships, but it sucks forever." It's good to know that no matter how long we've been making games, everyone has always thought they've sucked. But you know what didn't suck? This episode of CheckPoint.
Despite our best efforts.
Because of our best efforts.
Coming up, M&M is coming to Fortnite, so it turns out Epic isn't trying to target children, unless the kids today can pull themselves away from Skibbity Toilet long enough to get hype for a 51-year-old rapper.
Yeah, Checkpoint's back, baby. Ooh. While we were away,
so many things happened that we decided we didn't feel like talking about.
Oh, there was a lot. And I wanted to mention one briefly, which was that The Escapist finally just crumbled into pieces.
The Escapist had crumbled into pieces, but then had been relaunched largely off the hard work of one Yahtzee Croshaw.
Well, and also Nick, who was the editor-in-chief.
That's true.
Who was instrumental in us getting Unskippable back. So I want to shout out to Nick and Yahtzee as well. But basically, some folks were like, "Oh, I can't wait to see the Checkpoint story on this." It's not really the sort of thing we cover on Checkpoint. Like, a bunch of former Kotaku people also went and set up their own alternate journalist website as well, as have Yahtzee, Nick, and at least most of the video team from this latest iteration of The Escapist, who now has nobody. They just released all the extant videos that Yahtzee had banked. They were just like, all right, here's everything else. We wish the new people good luck in their own endeavor. So they've gone off and started their own thing called Second Wind, which is one of those names where it's like, it sounds great now. It's going to be a little weird later that your name is referencing the fact that you're, rising from the ashes of The Escapist. But I'm honestly very proud of them because, they presumably they all own this now. Yahtzee's resurrected his fully Ramblematic branding, and they're still basically they're all making the same video content that was going very, very well for The Escapist.
But now they just get all the profits.
Yeah, well, because the parent company, the story is essentially the parent company was like, you're not hitting the targets that we want, so we're going to fire you. And so they fired the editor-in-chief, and then everyone else was like, all right, then we're leaving.
Yeah, peace. We're never going to hit the targets that you want, and we're not going to do it if you don't give us the staff to do it.
Yeah, and so everyone went and formed their own thing. I don't actually know if it's everyone, but at least Yahtzee and Nick went and formed their own thing, and that seems to be going very well. So, shout outs to them. I posted about this on Mastodon, kind.social, and I said, it's like, I don't really care now. Like, I currently, after years of this, I have no love for the branding of The Escapist anymore. I have no nostalgia for that, anymore. Like, it was neat to see it back and doing well, and I'm glad that we were on a good terms with them, and I was on their podcast, and we got Unskippable back, and that was nice and everything, but it's like, do I feel? I don't feel anything about The Escapist finally done.
I think you feel something for Nick and Yahtzee and the people who work there, but you have zero loyalty to the brand or the corporate overlords.
Not anymore, no. Haven't for a while. So, there you go. In much more entertaining news, Mass Effect released a dog collar that can fit a human.
It could only fit a human. It's
It's so big.
It's like not a dog. It's not a collar for dogs.
Well, kinds of dogs, I guess.
We're not here to judge.
No. Well, I'm going to judge BioWare a little bit because it's like, what are you doing? What? Go make a game. What? Why, when you're doing Mass Effect merch, is that the merch? It's like, just Mass Effect Andromeda came out in 2017, and they're like, you know what? 6 years since we've done a Mass Effect game, you know what we really need? Mass Effect dog collar.
Dog collars. I don't know. Maybe they're up to something fun. Who cares? Ooh, I've got a thing that we normally file under. I didn't think people would care, but turns out people did care. So there is a game developer who worked at Rockstar, not recently, from like 1995 to 2009. So he hasn't worked there for almost 15 years. And he decides, hey, I'm going to start a blog, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, some of my game development stuff, including maybe some older stuff at Rockstar, thinking I haven't worked there in 15 years. I don't know anything new. Right?
Right.
Like, the statute of, like, he didn't work on anything past GTA 4. GTA 6 is about to come out. I would assume that if I had worked somewhere 15 years ago, I could basically talk about it at this point.
Sure. How'd that go?
Well, he put out a couple of very interesting blog posts sort of talking about, like, there's apparently, like, a city in the middle of, like, a long road in GTA 3 because they needed, or, like, there's a building, basically, in Portland because the game needed more time to load, and the developers were worried about players running out of road, essentially, running out of city to drive through because this road was so long. Kind of fun. That there was going to be some sort of multiplayer thing, but they just couldn't get it to work right, so it got scrapped.
Fair.
And one of the most interesting things that he talked about was that for a while, like at least a year or so, Rockstar was working on a sort of secret agent game, codenamed Jimmy, as in, like, this was, a Scottish studio working on a secret agent James Bond style of game. So, of course, they're going to call it Jimmy.
Jimmy Bond?
Jimmy Bond. But it never quite came together. And they were talking about cutting things and stuff, but it turns out that basically the whole company needed to get behind GTA 4 and focus on that to get that out the door, which obviously turned out to be a good idea because it was very popular. And, and eventually it got scrapped. And, this is something that's already been out in the world. This is not new information. Like, I think people already kind of knew about this Jimmy codename thing. The Rockstar was making an action game. So, it was interesting. And the blog, which had been up since early November, hadn't really gotten a lot of attention, but this post sort of explaining exactly what had happened to this, long lost Rockstar secret agent game did get attention. And then, like, a few hours later is when I saw it over on Eurogamer. And at that point, the blog post had already been taken down because the developer was like, I didn't think that people would care about my 15-year-old stuff, but it's not worth making people mad at me. So, well, whatever. So anyhow, I thought that was somewhat interesting. It was just interesting enough to not be on the internet. But it's still on the internet. Like if you like, it's literally like the top voted post on like the Rockstar subreddit right now. And it wasn't even a largely detailed post. It was very, very, very. It was not written to be a story. It was just like, hey, here's some interesting facts. It was like literally a paragraph that you could summarize. I did. And no dirt. I don't know. Like obviously Rockstar is known for being like notoriously secretive, but I feel like they could have let this. I think they could have let this 15-year-old T go.
Oh well.
That's,
I didn't have anything funny to add to the end of that. I'm sorry.
No, that's about all I've been up to. I've got a bad joke for you. Do you want to hear a bad joke?
Sure.
All right. Police are reporting that a bus full of jazz musicians has overturned on the highway.
Oh no.
And they are warning commuters for the possibility of lengthy jams. See, we're still as good as when we left. Like, God, we didn't miss that 2 weeks off at all.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.